Imagine this. A respected black belt master challenges a janitor, just for fun. Everyone laughs, certain the janitor will be embarrassed. But what happens next? It shocks the entire dojo and leaves every single person speechless. Stay tuned, because this story will change the way you see people forever. Fight me. Just for fun. The words cut through the air like a blade. The dojo, usually filled with the rhythmic sounds of kicks, punches, and shouted commands, fell completely silent. Every student, dressed in crisp white uniforms with belts tied tightly around their waists, froze where they stood. The very idea seemed absurd. Their instructor, a black belt, undefeated in competitions, respected by all, had just pointed at the last person anyone would have imagined, the janitor. The janitor was not one of them. He didn't wear a GI, he didn't train alongside them, and he didn't recite the codes of discipline before class began. Instead, he wore a simple light blue shirt, slightly faded from years of washing, and a pair of dark work pants. A ring of keys jingled softly at his side, a constant reminder of his role. He was the one who swept the mats after class, fixed the flickering lights above the sparring ring, and made sure the bathrooms were stocked and clean. He came early, stayed late, and worked quietly, almost invisibly. To the students, he was background noise. Someone necessary but unnoticed, like the hum of the ceiling fans or the smell of disinfectant on the mats. They might nod at him in passing, maybe even mumble a quick thanks when he handed them a forgotten water bottle, but never more than that. In their eyes, he was just a janitor. And yet, here he was, standing in the middle of the dojo, with every eye fixed on him. The black belt instructor, tall and broad-shouldered, wore a playful grin. His tone wasn't cruel, but it carried the weight of authority. He had no doubt he would win, it was obvious to him, to his students, to everyone. This was just a joke, a bit of fun, a light-hearted challenge to break the monotony of drills. Come on, the master chuckled, gesturing for the janitor to step forward. Let's see what you've got. A ripple of laughter spread through the rows of students. Some tried to stifle it with nervous coughs, but others smirked openly. The very idea was ridiculous, a janitor fighting their master. It would be like watching a child wrestle a lion. There could only be one outcome. Sir, he's going to get hurt, whispered one of the younger students, tugging at his friend's sleeve. Don't worry, the friend replied with a grin. Sensei won't go hard on him. This'll be over in seconds. The janitor, however, didn't laugh. He didn't fidget nervously, didn't look for an excuse to back out, didn't even break eye contact with the man who had challenged him. Instead, he stood still, his shoulders relaxed but his posture perfectly balanced, as though he had been waiting for this moment. His eyes were calm, steady, unflinching. They weren't the eyes of a man caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. They weren't the eyes of someone terrified of embarrassment. No, these were the eyes of someone who had seen this before, someone who understood far more than he let on. That subtle shift unsettled a few of the students. Their chuckles died down as they studied him more closely. There was something unusual about the way he carried himself. Even in his plain clothes, there was a discipline in his stance that didn't match his role as a janitor. Still, most dismissed it. He's just bluffing. Maybe he's too proud to back down. Either way, this'll be quick. The black belt took a step closer, still smiling. Don't worry. I'll take it easy on you. His tone was light-hearted, but his eyes carried a flicker of curiosity now. And then, to everyone's surprise, the janitor gave a single nod. It wasn't dramatic. He didn't raise his fists or shout in defiance. He simply nodded, calmly, decisively, as though the outcome didn't matter to him at all. The dojo, once filled with nervous giggles, fell into absolute silence again. For the first time, the students weren't entirely sure what was about to happen. The air in the dojo grew heavy. What had started as a playful challenge was beginning to feel different. The students, who had laughed moments before, now whispered among themselves, their voices hushed but filled with nervous energy. Is he really going to do this? One student murmured, glancing nervously between the master and the janitor. "He'll be down in seconds," another said quickly, though the edge in his tone betrayed a flicker of doubt. "Sensei's the best. Nobody beats him." But not everyone was so certain. A girl in the back row frowned, studying the janitor's calm stance. "Look at him," she whispered. "He doesn't look scared." Her friend snorted. "That's not bravery, it's stupidity." Still, the girl wasn't convinced. Something about the way he stood, the way he didn't fidget or shift nervously under the weight of everyone's gaze, felt unusual. People who were afraid showed it in their bodies, their hands shook, their eyes darted, their feet shifted restlessly. The janitor, however, was as steady as a stone. Meanwhile, the black belt instructor stretched his shoulders, rolling them back as if preparing for a light workout. His confidence radiated through the room. He wasn't worried. Why would he be? He had trained for years, fought in countless tournaments, and built a reputation that extended far beyond the walls of this dojo. But deep inside, a tiny spark of curiosity flickered. The janitor hadn't hesitated, hadn't made excuses, hadn't tried to laugh it off. He had simply accepted. The whispers among the students grew louder, feeding on one another. "This doesn't make sense. Maybe he's done some street fighting before." Street fighting? Against a black belt? Please, he doesn't stand a chance. But what if? That last question, what if, hung in the air like smoke. The janitor finally stepped onto the mat, his movements measured and quiet. He didn't puff out his chest, didn't posture like a man trying to prove himself. Instead, he walked with the calm confidence of someone who had nothing to prove at all. The students noticed. Some frowned, unsettled by it. Others shook their heads, dismissing it as false confidence. One young man leaned closer to his friend. "Do you think he's hiding something?" he asked. "Hiding what?" the friend scoffed. "He's a janitor. He cleans floors. That's it." But was it really? The master raised his hand slightly, signaling for silence. "All right," he said, his voice strong and steady. "Just a little sparring match. Nothing serious. Nobody gets hurt." The students nodded, reassured by his tone. Surely, he wouldn't go too hard on the janitor. This was just a playful demonstration, a chance for their sensei to show his dominance in a safe, controlled way. And yet, deep down, many of them were uneasy. The janitor's silence was unnerving. He hadn't said a single word, hadn't cracked a nervous joke, hadn't asked for mercy. He simply stood there, calm and unshaken, as though this moment was no different from sweeping the mats after practice. The black belt narrowed his eyes, watching him closely now. "You ready?" he asked. The janitor nodded once, the same calm nod as before. The students collectively held their breath. The whispers stopped. The chuckles died away. In that instant, the playful atmosphere that had filled the dojo just minutes earlier vanished completely. What had begun as a light-hearted joke was now something else entirely, something charged, unpredictable, and strangely dangerous. The master adjusted his stance, lowering into a ready position. His students had seen this countless times before. It was the stance of a man who meant business, who was prepared for whatever came next. But as their eyes shifted to the janitor, their certainty wavered. He wasn't in a stance. He wasn't even raising his fists. He simply stood there, feet grounded, body relaxed, as if daring the master to make the first move. The whispers started again, softer this time, more hesitant. What's he doing? Why isn't he readying himself? Does he even know how to fight? Yet, despite the doubts, none of them could look away. The janitor, silent and steady, had changed something in the room. The students no longer saw just a man in a blue shirt. They saw a mystery, one that, for the first time, made them wonder if maybe, just maybe, this fight wouldn't go the way they expected. The signal was given. For a moment, nothing happened. The room was so quiet that the students could hear the hum of the lights above and the faint creak of the wooden floor beneath the mats. Every pair of eyes locked onto the two men standing in the center of the dojo, the master, strong and confident, and the janitor, calm and unshaken. Then, with a sharp step forward, the black belt made the first move. A quick jab, clean and precise, aimed at the janitor's chest. It wasn't meant to hurt, just to test the waters, to gauge how the man would react. The janitor reacted instantly. With the smallest shift of his body, he slid sideways, letting the punch sail past him as though he had seen it coming before it was even thrown. His movements weren't flashy, but they were smooth, almost too smooth. Gasps rippled through the students. "Did you see that?" "No way, that was just luck." But before they could process what happened, the master struck again. This time, a front kick, lightning fast, aimed at the janitor's midsection. The kind of kick that could knock the wind out of a trained fighter. Once again, the janitor moved, not with panic, not with flinching, but with calm precision. He pivoted slightly, his hand brushing the kick just enough to redirect its force. The black belt's foot landed on the mat with a dull thud, and he found himself slightly off balance. The whispers grew louder. He dodged it again. No, that can't be right. How's he doing that?" The black belt straightened, his playful grin fading into something more serious. He studied the janitor carefully now. This wasn't luck. The way the janitor moved, the timing, the balance, it all spoke of training. Serious training. The master narrowed his eyes, then pressed forward with real intent. A flurry of punches came next, faster and harder, aimed at the janitor's head and torso. The students could barely keep up with the blur of his strikes. But the janitor flowed. There was no other word for it. He weaved, shifted, and sidestepped with such fluidity that it almost seemed like a dance. Each punch missed by inches, yet the janitor never looked rushed, never looked desperate. He was calm, controlled, as if the fight were happening in slow motion for him. Then came the first counter. The janitor didn't throw a punch. He didn't kick. Instead, with a simple step forward, he tapped the master's wrist as a punch came toward him. It was so small, so subtle, that many of the students almost missed it. But the result was undeniable. The black belt stumbled, his own momentum carrying him off balance. The room erupted in gasps. "No way!" He made Sensei stumble. The black belt quickly recovered, his pride burning now. He tightened his fists, his jaw set. This was no longer a joke. The janitor wasn't just avoiding his strikes, he was controlling the fight, and doing it without aggression. "Who are you?" the master muttered under his breath, circling the janitor. The janitor said nothing. His calm smile remained, his body loose, his eyes sharp. The master lunged again, this time with a sweeping kick aimed at the janitor's legs. It was powerful, designed to take an opponent off their feet in an instant. But the janitor lifted his foot lightly, stepping over the sweep with the ease of someone stepping across a puddle. In the same motion, he placed his hand on the master's shoulder, not striking, just guiding, and suddenly the black belt's own force carried him forward, stumbling again. The students were on edge now, their earlier confidence shattered. The man they had overlooked, the man they thought would be humiliated, was holding his own against their teacher, and he wasn't even breaking a sweat. For the first time, the black belt paused. His chest rose and fell heavily, his eyes locked on the janitor with a mixture of disbelief and respect. This wasn't the fight he had imagined. This wasn't fun anymore. This was a test, and he wasn't sure he was the one giving it. The dojo felt different now. The air was heavier, filled with tension that no one could laugh away. What had begun as a playful sparring session had turned into something none of the students, or even the master, expected. The black belt steadied himself, breathing harder than before. Beads of sweat formed on his forehead. Across from him, the janitor stood tall and composed, his breathing slow and even, as if the last few exchanges had been nothing more than a warm-up. The master clenched his fists, determination blazing in his eyes. He had been challenged before, faced skilled fighters, but this was different. This wasn't about strength or speed, it was about control. And right now, the janitor had all of it. With a sharp exhale, the master attacked again. His strikes came faster, sharper, each one aimed to break through the janitor's calm defense. The room echoed with the sound of fists cutting through the air and feet striking the mats. But the janitor didn't falter. He blocked when necessary, sidestepped when he could, and deflected with the kind of effortless precision that made it seem like he was reading the master's mind. Every move was economical, no wasted energy, no unnecessary showmanship. The students could hardly believe what they were seeing. Their whispers grew into hushed commentary. Sensei's giving it everything. But he's still not hitting him. Who is this guy? And then, the moment that silenced them all. The master launched a spinning kick, a move that had ended countless sparring matches in the past. The force behind it could have sent an opponent crashing to the ground. But as the kick came whirling toward him, the janitor simply stepped inside the strike, placing a hand gently on the master's back, and guided him forward. The black belt stumbled again, forced to catch himself before falling. The janitor hadn't struck him, hadn't hurt him, he had simply used his own momentum against him. For the first time, the students saw something they had never witnessed before, their master being outmaneuvered. Breathing hard, the black belt stopped and straightened. Slowly, he lowered his hands. His chest rose and fell, and in his eyes burned not anger, but realization. This wasn't a fight anymore. This was a lesson. He bowed his head slightly, his voice low but steady. "You're no ordinary janitor," he said, the words carrying through the silent dojo. "You've trained. You've fought. And you've humbled me today." The janitor gave only a faint smile, nodding in quiet acknowledgement. The students stood in awe. In that moment, their respect shifted. No longer did they see their master towering above a simple janitor. They saw two warriors, one teaching with fists and sweat, the other teaching with silence and grace. Respect had been earned, not through victory, but through humility. And it was a lesson none of them would ever forget. The dojo remained silent long after the sparring stopped. The students, who had once chuckled at the idea of a janitor fighting their master, now stood frozen in awe. Their laughter had died, replaced by wide eyes and hushed breaths. The black belt, still catching his breath, broke the silence first. His voice wasn't booming with authority this time, it was softer, humbled. You're not just a janitor. Who are you, really?" The janitor finally spoke. His voice was calm, deep, and carried a weight of experience that immediately silenced even the smallest whispers. "I was like you once," he began. "I trained every day. Martial arts was my life. I fought in tournaments, earned my black belt, even taught students of my own. I had dreams of going further, of making a name for myself." The students gasped softly, their eyes darting between him and their master. It was hard to believe, the man who mopped their floors, who fixed broken lights, had once been a teacher, a fighter, a champion. But life, the janitor continued, his tone steady but touched with quiet sadness, had other plans. "My family needed me. There were bills to pay, mouths to feed, responsibilities greater than my own ambitions. So I stepped away. I traded the dojo for a broom, the gloves for a toolbox. Not because I wanted to, but because that's what life demanded." He paused, his eyes sweeping across the room, meeting the gaze of each student. "But here's the thing, the training never leaves you. Discipline, focus, respect, they become part of who you are. Whether you're wearing a GI or a janitor shirt, those lessons live inside you forever." The master bowed deeply, a gesture of true respect. "I misjudged you," he admitted, his voice carrying both humility and gratitude. "I saw only the man who worked behind the scenes, and I forgot that greatness can be found anywhere." The students, following their master's lead, bowed as well. The sound of dozens of feet shuffling on the mat filled the room as they lowered their heads in unison. For the first time, they saw the janitor not as someone beneath them, but as someone who embodied the very principles their dojo claimed to teach: discipline, humility, and respect. The janitor gave a small bow in return. "I don't need your titles or applause," he said quietly. "All I want you to remember is this: never judge someone by the role they play in your life. You never know their story, or the battles they've fought before you ever met them." His words hung in the air, sinking deep into the minds of the students. Many of them felt a sting of shame, recalling the times they had overlooked him, the times they had dismissed him as unimportant. Now, they understood. As the janitor picked up his mop and quietly returned to his work, the dojo remained hushed. But the silence was no longer awkward, it was reverent. Every student there knew they had witnessed something extraordinary, a lesson no textbook or kata could ever teach. And from that day on, whenever the janitor walked into the dojo, he was no longer invisible. He was a living reminder of respect, humility, and the strength that lies hidden in the most unexpected places. Truly, what had happened that day silenced everyone. And that day, a humble janitor taught everyone a powerful lesson: true strength isn't about belts, titles, or appearances, but about discipline, respect, and heart. If this story inspired you, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe for more amazing stories, and ring the bell so you never miss what's coming next. Thanks for watching.